What's up and welcome to my end of year favorite television shows of 2021 countdown. Let's just start by saying it's a good year for TV. Obviously 2020, the start of the pandemic, it halted production on a lot of shows. I think this year we got a lot of shows that we might have gotten in 2020 lumped in, plus shows that probably would have been released in 2020 regardless. So the crop of television series to choose from was really flush this year. So it was great. A lot of hard decisions. There's a lot of shows that didn't make my countdown this year that I think probably would have in previous years. So tough list, tough cut this year. But without further ado, let's get right into it. Kicking it off with number 10, Yellow Jackets. Yikes. This is a dark one. Like really, really dark. I had briefly considered, American Horror Story double feature, which I thought was a big comeback season for AHS. I really enjoyed it. I also really appreciated the nostalgia of the new Dexter season. Not sure, it was quite as good as the other shows on this list from a critical standpoint, but, goddamn did I love Dexter back in the day. At least the early seasons. But nope, I went with a complete surprise in the dark category, at least for me, since, for whatever reason, Showtime series always tend to kind of elude my attention. But coming in at number 10, Yellow Jackets, which was so much more twisted than either American Horror Story or Dexter have ever been. Definitely not for the weak-stomached viewer. But if you can get through the graphic parts and the heavier themes, this is a very compelling story with great performances and a really kind of gripping mystery. Plus, I've always been a sucker for a flashback-driven storyline, particularly one with a plane crash involved. You can blame Lost for that, I guess, or credit Lost for that. I don't know, whatever. This show was super entertaining. Definitely worth the watch. Not perfect, a little predictable at times, a few plot holes here and there, but absolutely top 10 worthy. And to be fair, it also bled into January, so I guess that's a bit of a cheat, but whatever. That's my list. Number 10, Yellow Jackets. Number 9, the new Hulu original murder mystery entitled Only Murders in the Building. The whole thing is a play on the podcast Serial, essentially, right down to one of the characters being named Cinda Koenig, an obvious play on Sarah Koenig. And while it wasn't a flawless show, a little hokey at times, a bit over the top, a little slapsticky, it was still a fun watch. Steve Martin and Martin Short were as great as you'd expect them to be. Selena Gomez actually did an awesome job as well. There was also a whole bunch of pretty fun cameos, but I won't spoil them if you haven't seen it yet. This is more in the category of kind of shutting your brain off, maybe at the end of a long day, just watching something that makes you smile. Only Murders in the Building, a solid number 9. Which brings us to number 8, How To with John Wilson. What a refreshing and original show. Easily the most original show on this list. It's also probably the least accessible, but I say that without, necessarily fully believing that. I mean, I think if you were to describe this show to someone who hasn't really ventured outside of, the primetime network sitcom world, they may not rush to their TV to watch it. It's a series about, short video clips, shot documentary style. It's got a voiceover from the show's creator, John Wilson, about seemingly random topics. But I think if that same person sat down and actually watched an episode, they'd be hooked. Because the footage is, on the surface not related to the particular topic for that particular part of the episode. You're constantly trying to get the joke that John Wilson's telling, which is why before you even realize fully what's happening, because you're trying to catch up with everything, you get hit with this deeper meaning to the whole thing. It's honestly a really fascinating thing to witness. Plus, this deserves to be on the list just for how much goddamn footage he must have gathered just to put this thing together. I mean, elbow grease alone, huge accomplishment. That's number 8. Number 7, The Great. There are a few blind spots in my viewing patterns. As much TV as I watch, for whatever reason, I tend to overlook a lot of Hulu and Showtime shows, and somehow really avoid even hearing about them until someone in my life recommends it to me directly, like says, hey, have you watched this, or hey, you should watch this. Well, that was the case for Yellow Jackets, shout out to my friend Sarah, and certainly the case for Hulu's The Great, thank you to my buddy Nate. Now, The Great is already in its 2nd season, and I had somehow never seen an episode before, better late than never, I guess, but this show is amazing. The perfect balance of really outrageous humor, and then grounded drama. It was absurd, it was heartwarming, it was deeply emotional while maintaining this over-the-top slapstick sort of silliness. Really a fun watch if you're like me and haven't checked it out yet. Awesome work by Elle Fanning and Nicholas Hoult. I mean, awesome cast all around, but the two leads really elevated the show from being good to great. There you go, pun intended. The next show in the 6th spot is easily the most talked about show of the year. Or perhaps the most memed show of the year, if there's even a difference between those two statements. I, of course, am referring to the smash hit Netflix drama series out of South Korea, known simply as Squid Game. Squid Game is officially the most watched show in the history of Netflix at 111 million views in its first 28 days on the platform. And while big numbers don't necessarily translate to quality, see, Bridgerton, Sex Life, Tiger King, for example. No offense to those shows and their millions of fans, but Squid Game was really the opposite. A super stylish, creative, foreign language series that somehow passed Netflix shows with the, widespread appeal of basically softcore porn and or Carol Baskins. I mean, that's impressive. It was gripping, suspenseful, intense, emotional. I enjoyed it from the beginning to the end, with the one exception of the unbearable American characters. I mean, presumably these guys were speaking actual English, but it sounded worse than any dubbing I've ever heard in my life. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, Squid Game, worth the hype, 100%. Moving on to number 5, I Think You Should Leave. Now, I'll be the first to admit that the tone of the show is not exactly for everyone. For example, I absolutely loved it. My girlfriend did not. I suppose humor is subjective, but hey, this is my list. I'm including it. It's basically an entire show consisting of those throwaway sketches at the end of an episode of SNL. In my opinion, the best sketches. You know the ones I'm talking about, the old Kyle Mooney and Beck Bennett sketches, or more recently, the Please Don't Destroy skits. I Think You Should Leave reminds me of the weirdness of Late Night with Conan O'Brien. You know, kind of the off-the-wall bits that you can only really get away with on a show that airs at 1 a.m. And Season 2 somehow dives even deeper into the absurdity than Season 1 did. There's a darkness and sort of sadness to every character, which somehow only adds to the hilarity of it all. It's hard to explain, which is probably why it's so polarizing. All I can say is that for me, it is the funniest show of 2021. Number 4, Dave. Man, oh man, did Dave take me on a wild journey this year. I checked the Rotten Tomatoes scores from Season 1 to Season 2, and was not at all surprised to see that the critics' score went from 77% to 91%, while the audience score dropped from 91% to 78%. And what that tells us is that Season 2 was far less accessible than Season 1. There weren't as many freestyle scenes or straightforward jokes as before. To be honest, there was almost a little less Little Dicky and more Dave. Something that I'm sure Little Dicky fans and honestly fans from the first season were kind of torn on. I think I enjoyed both seasons for different reasons. I had the first season in the 2 spot last year with, as I mentioned, a less competitive field due to COVID. This season it's slotted at number 4 with a lot more to choose from. So both pretty solid finishes. But this is true for both seasons. The emotional peaks of Dave, the really heightened dramatic moments, they're some of the best on television right now. It's like a sleight of hand almost, where you're thinking about one thing or laughing at a dick joke, and then all of a sudden you're blindsided by a super heavy dramatic moment out of nowhere. I still love this show. Looking forward to Season 3. If it happens, by the way, keep an eye out for that. I believe that's up in the air right now. We'll see. But yeah, Dave, number 4. In the 3 spot, we have a new Netflix dramatic miniseries, Made. Am I inherently biased towards every single one of the cast members of The Leftovers? I mean, yeah. I think anyone who knows me or has listened to any of the content I've produced in the past, they would know that to be true. But does Margaret Qualley absolutely 100% deliver in the starring role in this show? Yes. Both can be true, and I couldn't be happier about that. This was really Margaret Qualley's first time getting top billing on something of this scale. I mean, she had a smaller part in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, smaller part in The Nice Guys, both pretty big box office movies. Her role in The Leftovers is relatively small, especially as the seasons went on. She starred in a small indie film opposite Sigourney Weaver called My Salinger Year. I never saw that. But no, I would say that this is her first major role, and it was one that really required a lot of range from her. She had to basically shoulder the entire burden of the series on her own, essentially. This is a terrible show with a lesser lead, and lucky for us, she absolutely crushed it. Coming in at number 2, we've got HBO's Hacks. HBO just doesn't miss, man. It's unbelievable. Yet another debut season of a great new show. The writing was fantastic, the acting even better. If I had to compare it to something, I'd say it's kind of similar in tone to Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Not quite the, breakneck pacing of the dialogue, but very similar style of humor. Meaning if you like one, you'll probably love the other. And I personally have always loved Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Can't wait for Season 4 coming February 18th. Jean Smart was great as Deborah Vance because, of course, she was. This is actually almost her second appearance on this year's list as she played the grandmother in Mare of Easttown, but that show just missed the cut. As I said, it was a competitive field. To me, it was essentially just True Detective Light. That's my opinion. Still a great show. You should absolutely check it out. It was very entertaining, but just missed the cut this year. She was also on the list back in 2019 playing Laurie Blake in HBO's Watchmen, a show that topped my 2019 best of list. Anyway, she's great. The bigger surprise here was Hannah Einbinder, the woman that plays Ava on the show. She essentially is a new face in Hollywood, at least in front of the camera. She's done some stand-up, she's done some writing, but I have a feeling we'll be seeing a lot more of her in the future. At the very least, we'll get to enjoy more Ava and Deborah Vance as the show was picked up for a second season over the summer. So good news there. Definitely watch Hacks, coming in at number 2 this year. And now for the number 1 television show of 2021, you guessed it, Succession. Succession has landed in my top 10 every single year that it's been on the air, steadily moving up the list from the 6th spot in 2018, then the 4th spot in 2019. There was no 2020 season, and now it's finally arrived at the top of the list, the best show of the year, and here's why. As has been the case with the previous seasons, it really comes down to the finale. The big payoff that this show seems to be more equipped to deliver than pretty much every other show on television these days. I mean, little moments of dialogue and sort of micro plot points that really don't seem to mean much in the beginning end up coming together in this kind of perfectly efficient way. Like a season-long dramatic version of Seinfeld, how all these plot points kind of connect right at the end of the episode, or in this case, the season. I mean, the entire viewing experience is enjoyable and entertaining and funny with the occasional touch of real drama, but then all of that buildup that you don't even necessarily realize was buildup crescendos into this powerful gut punch in the last few scenes. I think season 3 did a better job of this than even the previous 2 seasons, which did an excellent job of this. Seriously, an amazing show, an amazing season. I cannot wait for season 4. Just a masterpiece right now. I think it's becoming one of the best shows ever. I hope it continues along that trajectory. Succession, my best show of 2021. And that's it. That concludes this year's list. If you guys haven't heard from me in a while, I'm definitely going to start doing more content. I'm very much, as I mentioned in the leftovers, looking forward to The White House Plumbers on HBO, of course, starring Justin Theroux as well as Woody Harrelson. I'm looking forward to the new season of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I mentioned that a couple times on this list. A lot coming in 2022. I'm ready to get back out there, get back into not only television watching, but really diving in, like back when I used to watch it and then watch it again and take notes and then watch it again to make sure I didn't miss anything and then deliver a podcast for you guys. So that's the plan going forward in 2022. Shake off the rust, dust off the old podcast mic, and hopefully make some good content for you guys. But that's it. Hope you guys had a happy new year. Hope you just got 10 new recommendations, or at least a couple new recommendations from this list. Obviously, check out David St. Martin and Andrew Volpe doing their favorite films of 2021. A lot of interesting choices on there as well. Films you might not have heard of. Good stuff, good stuff. So thanks for listening. Have a good one, guys. Peace.